Whether it's a hot time in Florida or a rainy night in Georgia,
Looking for trouble?
it's the perfect time for the TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast.
Oh, yes, sir. Good to see you go from. Just glad to bring you the hottest thing in the country, real hot and blue, coming to WHB in Memphis, Tennessee.
Welcome to TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis Presley fan podcast. I'm Justin Gosman.
And I'm Olivia Murphy-Rogers.
Olivia, how's it going?
It's going very well, but how are you? Welcome back. This
Good.
is your first episode
It is.
on the main
Felt
feed.
Weird to say that because
Yeah.
I haven't said that phrase in probably the longest time since I started doing the podcast, almost a month. Because I did some bonus content, but it wasn't. I didn't say the opening thing. Our patrons will know already. John and I did some stuff that's a collaboration between TCBcast and Atomic Wax, and just some bonus content. So it's on both his. I think he's got coffee, and we've got the Patreon. So it's on both. But it's about Roy Hamilton, which we'll talk a little bit later about how that ties in with this one of the topics of this week's episode.
Yeah.
But Elvis news. I know that Beck and John covered a lot of the ongoing news. Also, I just got to say, before we go any deeper, thanks, Beck, for covering while I was out and making room for me to take the time off.
Beck did a fabulous job putting it together.
She did.
Great shows.
Yes, really fun. And was fun to hear one that was just the three of you, Ryan and you and Beck. That was definitely different. But so much fun to edit. That's the thing, is that I still edited all the episodes. So it wasn't like I wasn't involved in the show for a month, that I wasn't working on it. But yeah, I guess I just wasn't realizing how much I needed the break, because I came in, my notes for this episode are 10 pages long. I'm just so excited and invigorated, ready to talk. Yeah, I did. I'm really excited about what 2026 has to hold. But how have you been?
I've been good. It's been unseasonably warm here. Has it been warm there?
It has, although we did have a little snow overnight last night. It didn't stick at all, but it started out as rain and it turned into snow. So we woke up to snow on the ground, and we hadn't seen really much snow at all this winter. So that was kind of nice. It was nice to just have moisture, period. My allergies have been giving me chaos, insanely bad.
Yeah.
But yeah, so let's see. What were the big Elvis news things that you and I hadn't talked about yet? The Minneapolis footage that Beck and John briefly referenced on the news section of last week's episode. I shared out a link, if you don't follow listeners on our Facebook page, a link to a YouTube channel, Nathan Lennon, who I've seen his channel before. I recognize the emblem that he's got, and I've seen a few of his videos, so I know he does edits and things like that. But synchronized the Minneapolis footage from 1956 that surfaced last week with audio from other sources, that we have of recordings of Elvis from the 50s doing a lot of the songs that he did on stage. And for the most part, it seems accurate. There's a few where I'm like, well, the clip is short enough that you could have probably put anything to that and it would have worked. But there's some that are quite lengthy where it's like, oh yeah, that is absolutely the song that Elvis is singing on that. Like Heartbreak Hotel. And yeah, this was so cool. What did you think?
Yeah, I thought it was awesome. So I hadn't seen it before. When Beck was discussing it, Beck and John, I hadn't seen it. So I wasn't sure what to expect, other than that it was pretty short. But it's 2 minutes and 53 seconds, and it feels like long. When they said that, I was like, oh damn, But it's a good clip, and I didn't realize when they were talking about it, the clip shows a lot of different songs, so a couple seconds of a lot of different songs, so you really get a good view of kind of an Elvis 50s concert, like just little snippets, but it's just, there's nothing like an Elvis 50s concert and
Yeah.
seeing those dance moves. Oh my God, it's so fun.
It's
And he
sort
just,
of
yeah,
it is essentially the video version of what they had the Vancouver show, that you
yeah,
got a lot of snippets of the Vancouver show, but you didn't have any visual to it, and so it was like, well, it's nice to hear all these clips, but you don't have a visual component. And this was the other way. It's like, well, we don't have the sound. And then thank goodness that there was a fan out there who went through and really, I love our fellow Elvis fans who just like they dig in and
fair
they
enough.
don't
Yeah.
care. Yeah. Because I mean
Yeah.
that's the same thing with a project like the Complete Works, that bootleg project, like and also Memphis Recording Service, when they did the Tupelo footage to piece that together
Oh,
and
yeah, yeah.
put the audio, synchronize it correctly. The amount of patience that it takes to do that.
No, I can't
Certainly.
imagine.
Yeah, so that's labors of love, absolutely.
Yeah.
So very cool to
Thank
see
you,
all of
Nathan.
that. Let's see, the other big thing, of course, obviously, as they mentioned, the Epic Blu-ray release date was announced for June 16th, 2026. As they mentioned, question about bonus features. Doesn't seem like there's going to be. What are your thoughts on that, Olivia?
Oh, that's a bummer. Are they just dragging it out because at some point they're going to release another one with bonus
I
features?
don't know. They haven't technically promised anything, but they talked about it enough. I don't know. At the same time, like when the 2022 film was done, we weren't promised another movie. So the fact that we got another movie at all, I'm grateful for. And
Sure.
I think going forward, we really should try to take Elvis projects, try not to take them for granted, especially ones that have that much in the way of resources thrown behind them, because I think it's going to get, I don't think we're probably not going to see Elvis in IMAX again. I'll just say
Yeah.
and so I'm really glad that we had that opportunity, and I am looking forward to getting it on a physical release, but I will probably wait until there's a definitive edition, or at the very least to make sure that it's the 4K version of it, so that it's a little bit future proofed. The one thing that came up, I noticed within the last week or so, is that all of a sudden a lot of the Facebook groups and the fan forums, I know the Steve Hoffman forums were going on about it, the aspect ratio on that's the way it is footage being squished a bit, so the Elvis and everything in the image looks a little thinner than they're supposed to in the frame. And I didn't bother me that much. I noticed it. It was very obvious in the trailer, but it wasn't distracting in any way, and certainly not distracting when you were in the theater. I didn't think it mattered that much, and I think it's more. I think now that it's in digital, people are starting to watch it at home. You're starting to get the people who supposedly are Elvis fans, but they didn't go see it in theaters, and they already don't like Baz Luhrmann's approach to things, coming in and just raising chaos. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely not something I would have noted. Like me not being a movie
Overly
buff,
technical,
really.
yeah.
Yeah, it's like I don't know. I'm looking at like video footage from the 70s. Like
Yeah.
I'm
mean, and
like,
also,
been out of shape about how the
this
quality.
isn't to denigrate anybody's like capabilities to see these things, but if you have an untrained eye, you're just not going to notice stuff. Like, I notice frame rate issues on things a lot more frequently because I'm very much into video games, and I can tell when things are 30, 60, 24. I've sort of trained my eye to that, and I can also tell when, for instance, I've seen like AI upscaled Elvis footage on YouTube where someone has put something that was clearly in 24 frames a second, and they've brought it up to 30, but they didn't properly do a frame generation to sort of make it smoother, so you get like a bunch of ghosting in the image, and it just looks really bad. And not everybody notices that. Some people just are just like, it's a performance. I don't care. It just looks good to me. It looks sharp. It looks clear. And I've seen some really messy ones, and it doesn't bother some people too. So, yeah, I mean, it's all subjective. I mean, certainly, like, you can objectively observe it, but I don't. Whether it bothers you is subjective. And if it bothers somebody that much, you're going to have a copy of it. Just go in and edit it yourself if you care about it that badly.
There you go. There you go.
So correct it yourself, since that's what Elvis fans, we like to do that. We like to correct our the major mainstream releases. We do have a new patron to thank. Holger Tice, thank you for joining up over at patreon.com/TCBcast. Weirdly, no listener feedback, no emails. Where's the emails at, people? I go away for a month, and there's only been a couple emails. I want to hear from you folks. How you doing out there? Nothing.
Well, I'll send a quick email to a verbal email to Beck and John. I did really like their episode from last week about they're comparing the two remix albums.
Yes.
And so they both one of my favorite Elvis song is Just Pretend. And on one of them there's a version with a female artist, Helene. I don't remember.
Helene Fischer, who's a German vocalist.
There you go. They both kind of hated on this song, but I love that version because, and maybe I don't know if Beck is a singer, like in private, but maybe Beck can feel me on this. I love putting it on and being able to pretend that I am singing on stage with Elvis, and there's not many songs that I can do that with, but so Elvis with a female vocalist, I'm all about. That's what I
can recall the things we said. Oh, why you crying?
But now I know it was wrong to go.
Reminds me, what you just said reminds me of when Jamie and Kay used to talk about singing along with The Lady Loves Me. Yes.
Yep. I do that too.
That's fair. That's very fair. Let's see, for us guys, we'd have to do Who Needs Money, I guess.
Just let my liquid assets overflow. You can't take it with you when you go. So, who needs money? That lovely, lovely money. Who needs money? Not me.
There you go.
Not quite the same for doing a duet with Elvis. Yeah. So cool. Well, we didn't really have a main topic this week. We sort of decided to do kind of deeper songs of the week this week, get to ones that have been on the list for a while that are fan favorites. And they seemed quite intimidating, which is why I think they've been on the list for a while.
He has a new, distinctive style. Elvis Presley. Let's give him a nice hand.
Baby, wearing that love don't look. Don't tell me, baby, you gotta go. I got the hi-fi high and the lights down low. There is no doubt you will want to shout about. Give a yell, life is swell, shout it out. Kiss me extra tender, hold me extra tight, for our faded love. We got the words of Lamar?
But do you want to go first? Because I'm pretty sure yours will be a little shorter than mine. But
Mine will be a lot shorter. Yeah. So my song of the week is Snowbird.
So little snowbird, take me with you when you go to that land of gentle breezes where the peaceful waters flow. Spread your tiny wings and fly away. And take the snow back with you where it came from on that day. The one I love forever is untrue. And if I could, you know that I would fly away with you.
Good pick.
Yeah. This is one I've always really liked this song, so it really stuck out to me when I was looking over our list. So I'm glad I got to it. So Snowbird was originally written by Gene MacLellan, who was a Canadian singer-songwriter, and he's also the songwriter of Put Your Hand in the Hand, which we know Elvis recorded as well. So when Gene was working on a TV show called The Sing-Along Jubilee with Anne Murray, and he just gave her a tape of songs that he'd written, and he told her he came up with this one song, Snowbird, in about 25 minutes when he's from Prince Edward Island on Canada. And he was walking along the beach and he was watching a flock of snow buntings. And it just sparked this idea for a song about a snowbird. So for those of us who are not ornithologists, snow buntings obviously primarily live in very snowy areas. They live in the Arctic and they migrate to Canada or northern US or sometimes parts of Europe or Asia. So they travel where it's slightly warmer, but it's never a place where it's so warm that they're out of snow. So they're very hardy birds. So Gene told Anne Murray that he hadn't recorded this specific song, Snowbird, yet, and he offered for her to be the first one. So she recorded it in 1969 and released it as the B-side to a single in 1970.
Beneath its snowy mantle, cold and clean, the unborn grass lies waiting for its coat to turn to green. The snowbird sings a song he always sings and speaks to me of flowers that will bloom again in spring.
And the song became a huge hit. It reached number 2 on Canada's pop charts and number 8 on the U.S. pop singles chart. It reached number 1 on both Canada and U.S.'s adult contemporary charts, and also crossed over to number 1 on Canada's country chart and number 10 on U.S.'s country chart. And this is a song, so it really filled up the charts, and this is the song that really put Anne Murray on the map and brought her into, popular culture. And because of this song, Anne Murray was the first Canadian female singer to reach number 1 on the charts and earn a gold record in the U.S. And you can actually see a very short clip of Anne Murray performing this song for the first time on that show that they did together, the Sing-Along Jubilee, on YouTube. Yeah, so it's nice. It's definitely not the full song, but it's nice to see her kind of in its original form.
Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snow back with you where it came from on that day. What I love forever is untrue. And if I could, that I would fly away with you. Yeah, if I could, that I would fly away with you.
And so listening to Anne Murray's, there's a lot of similarity between her arrangement and Elvis's. His is like almost a one-to-one copy. But so after her success, a ton of artists began recording it. Way too many to name. So just within 1970 itself, the year she released it, 14 popular artists recorded it.
Holy
so like
crap.
Loretta Lynn, Slim Whitman, Perry Como, Burl Ives, Bing Crosby, Andy Williams, and Gene MacLellan himself. So most of the versions are pretty similar arrangement-wise. And they don't really make a great attempt to do anything unique with it. But I do want to highlight Gene MacLellan's own recording, just because he is the original songwriter. So he recorded the song, like I said, 1970, while Anne Murray was enjoying a huge success with it. And he released it on his debut album, which is a self-titled album. And his version, it wasn't a single from the album. It didn't chart or anything, but it is very nice, and it has a much more prominent like harmonica part throughout the song than other versions. So
Yeah.
he did something a little different, and his version's interesting because it includes a whole nother verse that you don't hear on any other version.
My mind says that I only want to be a wanderer, and just like you, I'm longing to be free. But in my heart, I know it's just a lie. For without her love, the vision of my happiness would die. The breeze along the river seems to say.
So he says, it's a short verse that says, the mind says that I only want to be a wanderer, and just like you, I'm longing to be free. But in my heart, I know it's just a lie, for without her love, the vision of my happiness would die. So when I heard that, I was wondering if that verse had been there all along, and Anne Murray decided to cut it out, and therefore, since her version is the one that most artists go on, that it just didn't get into, the wider awareness of the public, or if Gene added the verse after she recorded it in order to really kind of make it his own, since it was his song. So we'll never know, but
That's
it's
interesting.
Yeah.
No, and I did give a listen to Gene's version of it, since I knew you were going to pick this as your song.
Yeah.
And I really like his. Has definitely a lot more of a folk feel by comparison to Anne's, which does have, like, there's a little folk country, but also a little pop with Anne. As kind of, and certainly it's a lot more polished for, which made for great radio play. But I like Gene, and he's got a nice voice.
He does. Yeah, he does. So there were like pretty much only 3 versions released within the 70s where the performer did something a little different that's worth noting. So I'll quickly mention those. So in 1972, Bing Crosby, like I said, released a version, and on this version, he is with Count Basie's orchestra. So this is very different. It's very swingy and jazzy, just completely different take on the song.
Beneath the snowy mantle, cold and clean, the unborn grass lies waiting for its coat to turn to green. The snowbird sings the song he always sings, and he speaks to me of flowers that will bloom again in spring. When I was young,
I tend to prefer just reading through the lyrics and thinking of meaning. I tend to prefer it being closer to the country folk type of song, but it's Bing Crosby, so it's interesting to hear a different take on it. And then that same year, 1972, Boots Randolph actually put out an album. Boots Randolph plays the greatest hits of today. I don't know if we've ever discussed that. I don't remember that coming up.
Boots had a whole parallel career, and same with Floyd Kramer. They released a ton of music, instrumental albums throughout the 60s and 70s.
That makes sense. That totally makes sense. So he has just an instrumental version, which is nice. It's obviously very saxophone heavy, so it's again a very different take. And finally, in 1971, there's an artist named Dennis Walks, who I'm not familiar with, but he seemed to have a very big career. So I don't know how I missed him, but he has a reggae version. So that is interesting.
Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snow back with you where it came from on the day. The one I love forever is and true.
So yeah, and like I said, the rest of the versions are pretty similar. So now jumping back to 1970, Elvis recorded a version. So in September, Elvis returned to Nashville to record a few more songs to put on a country album to go with a selection of songs he had already recorded during those marathon sessions in June. So musicians at this session were Eddie Hinton, who was filling in for James Burton, and Chips Young on guitar, Norbert Putnam on bass, Jerry Kerrigan on drums, Charlie McCoy on harmonica, and David Briggs on piano. So September 22nd, Elvis had a session at RCA Studio B, and he kicked off the session with Snowbird. And his arrangement is very similar to Anne Murray's. Even Ernst Jorgensen mentions in A Life with Music that his version was, quote, tossed off with no attempt at an original arrangement. So Elvis was reportedly in a kind of poor mood during the session and was really in a hurry to get out of the studio. So that's a little unfortunate, but he still came out with a good final product.
He rushes through a lot of songs in that September session. And even this one, there's not a lot of complete takes, which I know you'll get to, but yeah.
No, yeah. So at first he has a rehearsal, which is pretty complete.
Breeze along the river seems to say that she'll only break my heart again should I decide to stay. So little snowbird, take me with you when you go to that land of gentle breezes where the peaceful waters flow. Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snowbird with you where it came from.
Y'all ready?
Yep.
And then take one is complete. The guitar intro is a bit more intricate than in the master, but otherwise it's like pretty similar arrangement. Take two also complete and kind of similar, like a little more intricate, detailed guitar.
Beneath this snowy mantle, cold and clean, the unborn grass lies waiting for its coat to turn to green.
Otherwise, a nice full take. It seemed completely serviceable to me. There is a take three that we don't have. Take four is a false start. The musicians, I guess the guitarists, mess up in some type of way. It wasn't apparent to me exactly how it fell apart. But after it falls apart, Elvis says, "Can we bring in the Osmond brothers?"
Okay, this is 4.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay, 5.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Can we bring in the Osmond brothers?
Take five, another quick false start, and then take six is the undubbed master.
Yeah.
So then Elvis did, I think that night, record a harmony vocal. So the last line of the song is Elvis harmonizing with himself. And then October 28th, they go back and record strings for overdubs, I'm sorry. And that's really the session there. Now, do you have anything to add before I go on to live performances?
No, other than that, I really enjoy it. I'm glad that it made it onto Elvis Country. It fits very well there. It shows, I mean, that entire album shows Elvis's very broad interpretation of what the word country music means.
Yeah.
And that includes, modern contemporary stuff as well. And it was nice for him to show that connection. And it's interesting that he did, seem to like Anne's stuff. And it was nice, even though it wasn't on Snowbird, which I don't know why they didn't do it on Snowbird, but it was nice when Anne Murray came back around on the Christmas Duets album and did a virtual duet with Elvis, because I think that was a nice full circle thing for her to get to sing with Elvis. So
I never thought of that.
when she knew that he liked her song.
Yeah, yeah. I never thought of that. That is cool. So he actually did perform the song, I think only 3 times from what I found live. But on January 29th, 1971, at the dinner show in Vegas, the International, he performs it, and it's actually a really funny recording to listen to, or performance to listen to, because he suggests Snowbird.
Let's see. I tell you what. Let's do Snowbird. You like that song, Snowbird? We don't know it, but if you like it, we'll. Anybody know it? How's it start? How's it finish? And what's the middle of it? I got the rest of it. Just bring a stool up here and let me sit down, man. You know, I ain't gonna work too hard tonight. Hell, let's get through eating.
So he sounds like he's in a really good mood on stage. He asks for a stool to sit on while he sings it, and then the band starts and he says, "That's too slow. You're gonna have the bird flying like the snowbird cuts out."
I wish we had the visual for that. I could just imagine him like flapping his wing or his arms slowly.
Yeah.
That's too slow. I didn't even get it, man. You don't have that. Wait a minute, hold it. You don't have that bird going about like that, you know. Snowbird cuts out. You got it. Beneath the snowy mantle cold. Wait a minute, fellas, hold it. Well, that's America in some parts of China. Okay, look.
And they do a proper intro, and then he joins in. And so they do the full song, and it's a really great performance. Like vocally is great. The band totally gels. The backing vocals nail the ending, and it's just I've said this.
I don't even think they had rehearsed it.
That's the thing. Like, well, maybe, but like I've said this a million times on the show, but like it never ceases to amaze me when they just do these one-off performances, and it just works like they've done it together for their whole lives. It's like it's just incredible.
The breeze along the river seems to say that she'll only break my heart again should I decide to stay. Snowbird, take me with you when you go to that land of gentle breezes where the peaceful waters flow. Spread your tiny wings and fly away, and take the snow back with you where it came from on that day.
And this is like no exception. It's yeah, and there's no indication of why he suggested it or anything like that. But he did do it 2 more times, pretty soon after. So February 19th, 1971 at the midnight show. We only have an audience recording, so it's not good quality, but from what you can hear, it sounds really similar. He's in really good like vocal shape, and he's putting out a great performance. And then once the song is done, you can hear him say something to the audience, and it's hard to tell exactly what he's saying, but he's in some way complimenting his band and backing vocalists, and he says something about like they have to learn 150 songs, and he's complimenting them for being able to pull out like these one-off songs like this, which I thought was really nice that he gave them credit for that.
This group up here behind me probably knows 150 songs, but they can go into like that. But if we don't have time to do it, I'd like to, but we have to take them on different nights. So we thank you for coming and see our show. We're going to change you in our job.
And then the final live performance was the next night, February 20th, 1971 at the midnight show. Really similar. It's just an audience recording, so it's really hard to hear, but it sounds like, from what you can hear, it sounds like
like the song Snowbird.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes the audience recordings are like that, where it's like, well, it sounds like it's probably that song.
There's like times where you can pull out his vocal and it sounds like he's giving it his all. So yeah. So yeah. I mean, so that is really Snowbird from Elvis.
I would
overall,
assume.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry to interject. I would assume that Elvis probably got a note, maybe from the Colonel, maybe from Felton or somebody associated with RCA. Plug your new album, because Elvis Country did release at the start of the year, right around Elvis's birthday, and so it would make sense that doing it sometime during that engagement to do at least one of the songs from Elvis Country.
I think he says that too in one of the audience recordings. He says something about an album. So I think I bet you're right.
That would be my educated guess. I didn't listen to them all, so
no, it makes sense to me. So what was I gonna say? Okay, so that's Elvis's version. So overall, I've always appreciated the song for kind of how poetic the lyrics are.
Yeah.
And just kind of speaking of almost being envious of a snowbird's ability to just like up and fly away when the weather no longer suits them. But knowing that the author can't do that regardless of how his partner's treating him.
And it's quite bittersweet.
Yeah. And kind of like how it starts talking about the grass underneath the snow waiting for the opportunity to turn green. Just how like discussing how stifling a bad relationship can be to you. So it's really poetic, and I think Elvis did a respectable job with his attempt at the song. Be it not an attempt he seemed to be overly excited about apparently in the studio, but turned out,
it's a shame.
Turned out good.
But it's a good version. You know, I always enjoy it whether I listen to it kind of on its own, or if I'm listening to the Elvis Country album. I always enjoy it. And I mean, that was the first track on the album, if I remember right. Yeah. So
it is.
They clearly felt, at least good enough about it to sequence it early on the record.
Sure. And I wanted to end my Song of the Week by highlighting one final version, and that is by Catherine MacLellan. And Catherine is the daughter of Gene. And when Catherine was 14, she came home from school one day and found that her father had died by suicide as a result of a lifelong struggle with mental illness. And she talks about remembering the last thing he said to her was that she would have to be brave for a while. So Catherine dealt with the grief around losing her father by starting to write songs, and she ended up following in her father's footsteps and becoming a singer-songwriter. And one of the most admirable things about Catherine's career is that she has placed a really large emphasis on being an advocate for mental health awareness, and she talks very openly in her shows about her own struggles with depression after losing her father. And she even had a nightly live show on Prince Edward Island called If It's All Right With You, The Life and Music of My Father, Gene MacLellan, where she discussed her and her father's experiences with mental illness and creating music and the relationship between those two. And in Catherine's live shows, which she still does today, she performs Snowbird.
Oh, wow.
And her version is completely stripped down. It's just her and one other guitarist, and it's much slower, and it's just raw, and it's the best interpretation I've heard of the song.
Wow. And I'll have to give that a listen for sure.
You have to, and it had, obviously just so much meaning knowing the background and her personal story.
When I was young, my heart was young then too, and anything that it would tell me, that's the thing that I would do. And now I feel such emptiness within, for the thing that I want most most in life's the thing that I can't win.
And she has a YouTube channel, and she has a version of the song where she's in her living room just playing the piano and singing. So similar to the live versions, it's simple and just evocative and beautiful. And in this version, she includes her dad's unique verse that no one else has.
Oh, that's cool.
My mind says I only want to be a wanderer, and just like you, I'm longing to be free. But in my heart, I know it's just a lie. For without her love, the vision of my happiness would die.
It is. And I found an interview with Catherine. They asked her a bunch of questions, and they asked if she could have written any song in history that wasn't hers, what it would have been. And she said, Snowbird. She said, it's so good, and I've played it a million times, and it still doesn't get old. The lyrics never lose their meaning.
Wow.
Yeah, so that
That's
gave me
special.
a complete new appreciation for the song. And yeah, so that is Snowbird.
Yeah, if I could, you know that I would fly away with you. I saw Jonah eat the whale, and Daniel twisted the lion's tail, and I crossed over Canaan all along.
Amazing pick. Thank you,
Yeah.
Olivia.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, my song of the week.
Let's go.
Oh, all right. So for my song of the week, our patrons will know because they've seen the list. We have this lengthy list of all the songs of the week, and very occasionally we'll put our names next to ones that we want to get to. I know that Beck still has dibs on What
Now, My Love? Or
What Now, My Love? Yeah, which she's a big fan of. And the one that I've had my name by for at least a couple years now has been this song as my song of the week. And Olivia, my song of the week is The Quest.
For the right, without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest.
Yes. Amazing pick. I cannot wait to dive into this.
And everyone's sitting there going, what the are you talking about? The Quest, also known as The Impossible Dream.
Mm-hmm.
So to tell the story of The Impossible Dream, I have to tell some other stories. So Olivia, what is your familiarity with the story Don Quixote?
So I read Don Quixote. So in college, one of my majors was Spanish. So junior year, a group of us studied abroad in Spain. We had an amazing time, and we really bonded doing that together. Living in a foreign country, and we all lived with host families, and they were not allowed to speak English to us.
Oh,
So it
wow.
was really a full immersion program. It was just just one of those core memories of life that I'm so glad I had that opportunity. So anyway, we have this junior year of college where we really don't take we took classes, but they really went easy on us because they knew we were just there to experience life,
Right.
So we went through junior year, really not doing any schoolwork. And then we come back senior year, and we have to read Don Quixote in Spanish. And this was really difficult because it's written in an old style of Spanish that would be comparable to reading Shakespeare.
Yeah.
I'm not good at that in English. So I would say I've like semi-read Don Quixote, and I'm not confident how much I really captured. I passed the class, but I struggled. We all struggled through it. I'm sure a lot of the symbolism kind of went over my head, and I remember being like, so there's people, and then Don Quixote like renames them, and I remember being like, who is this character? And like, it's a little confusing. It's a confusing, unique story to begin with. So, I'm like semi-familiar with Don Quixote,
but in a very unique way that most people haven't had as an experience.
I've been to La Mancha.
Have you ever seen The Man of La Mancha, the musical?
No, I haven't. Okay.
And you haven't seen any other adaptation, read an English translation?
I don't think I've read it.
Okay. It's just just baseline information.
Yeah. I have like broad strokes.
Okay.
I have broad strokes.
So Don Quixote was a novel written by Miguel de Cervantes, who was an author, a former soldier in the Spanish Navy, and later a tax collector. He wrote Don Quixote in the early 1600s, around 1605. He was also a poet as well, and apparently not as good of a poet as he was a literary writer. But he was inspired by much earlier chivalrous medieval novels that had become the rage in sort of the preceding century in Spain. There's a few that are actually name dropped in Don Quixote that are in the character's library, because Don Quixote is a nobleman who, inspired by these old stories, decides that he is himself a knight and goes off racing across the Spanish countryside in search of adventures and quests, wearing armor, and part of his delusions of grandeur, literal delusions, is that he is treating normal everyday people like they're characters from these old stories. And eventually he befriends and makes a farm laborer named Sancho Panza his squire. And over the course of the first half of the novel, which was originally just the first novel, it led to a lot of comedy, but also got him into a lot of trouble. And many, many people along the way think Don Quixote has totally gone insane. It's like someone reading a lot of comic books and then deciding one day, I actually am Batman. Right. And going off and going up to, the local police station and being, or not even the police station, going up to like some security guard at a mall and being like, okay, Commissioner Gordon, let's go take down the criminals.
It's like Elvis pulling out his narcotics badge and stopping an airplane.
It's a little bit like that. It sure is.
Wait, so you talking about how funny how comedic it can be reminds me that there's another version. You may have seen this. Being around my age, I remember in school on a rainy day, we didn't have recess, but we watched, what is that show? Not Bingo. That show with the dog that talks
Wishbone.
Yes, there's
What's
a
the story Wishbone? Yes.
There's a Wishbone episode of this.
Of Don Quixote. Yeah, Wishbone frequently adapted old public domain stories for kids with, a little dog playing a lot of the key roles. I haven't thought about Wishbone in forever. That's awesome.
That's my reference to this.
No, that's great. So Don Quixote becomes this iconic novel of Spanish literature, argued to be one of the modern novels, or the first modern novel. Very still in the sense that it's still quite legible when brought up to modern language. If you get through that filter of crossing forward, it's like how, in the way that you were comparing to Shakespeare stuff is still legible story-wise. Like, you can still tell what the characters are saying, but you do need like a level of translation of, okay, what are the cultural references that I'm missing out here? Sure. But for the most part, if you have those cultural references, then the joke still works and the story beats still work. And even if you don't, it still kind of does. it still works really well as a story, and it's resonated with a lot of people over the years. But we have to jump ahead now from the 1600s all the way ahead some 350 years to playwright and theatrical director Dale Wasserman, who had taken a number of jobs in the 1950s, and he was writing scripts for programs that broadcast plays performed live on television. There was the Matinee Theater on NBC, the Kraft Television Theater, sponsored by Kraft Foods, also on NBC, and eventually he did a few shows for the DuPont Show of the Month on CBS, and one of those was an adaptation of Don Quixote. Wasserman later, in a 1999 interview about Cervantes, recalled that he was in Spain working on a film project at the time when he kind of came up with the idea, because what had happened was that while he was there, the news media in Spain reported, hey, there's a famous screenwriter in our area, but they mistakenly reported that he was there researching to make an adaptation of Don Quixote. And his exact quote was, "That was a laughing matter because, like most people on Earth, I had not read Don Quixote." But that idea gave him the inspiration to, maybe I should do that. Yeah. So when he began developing his story for DuPont's Show of the Month, he decided to pitch this adaptation of Don Quixote, but instead of being a faithful adaptation of the novel, he instead pitched this idea, let's have a new framing device where the original historical author, Cervantes, is a fictionalized character within the story, and he's been arrested and imprisoned, which is, as it turns out, somewhat based on something that did actually happen. He was, in reality, jailed for about 3 years starting in 1597 while working as a tax collector. But they changed some of the details in terms of when it takes place and how old he is. And the big thing that they change is that rather than being merely a poet and an author and a former soldier and a tax collector, he's also an actor in the play. And this gives them flexibility so that when the other prisoners in this prison that he gets jailed to threaten to steal his possessions, the fictional Cervantes stages a play within a play with the other prisoners taking on the roles within the story of Don Quixote. And he does this in order to make a defense of why he should be able to keep his belongings, including this treasured manuscript that he has with him, which is, of course, revealed to be the story of Don Quixote. But this framing device is used both in the TV broadcast of what at the time was titled I, Don Quixote, and subsequently its musical adaptation that opened on Broadway in 1965. Now, what happened was that after the play aired, Wasserman tried to get it unsuccessfully staged until a friend of his, Albert Mauret, who would go on to direct the original run of Man of La Mancha on Broadway, he suggested, why don't you just hire some songwriters, turn this into a musical? You'll probably have a better shot at selling this thing as a musical. And it turned out that the composer that they looked at bringing onto the project, Mitch Lay, had some money to spare and was potentially interested in investing in the show. So Man of La Mancha was a script by Dale Wasserman with music by Mitch Lee, and originally a poet named W.H. Auden, who was the lyricist. However, one of the many, many problems that they ran into during production was that Auden had been drawn into the project as a fan of the original novel, and he had a very different interpretation of the character of Don Quixote, specifically relating to the ending, which we'll come back to, so put a pin in that. So Auden left over creative differences, and instead there were a string of other lyricists until finally they landed on this guy named Joe Darien. Joe Darien had previously done a Broadway show called Shinbone Alley, which was a collaboration with Mel Brooks, the comedian, and now, as we know, Blazing Saddles, Spaceballs, that Mel Brooks, the producers. So they had done this show called Shinbone Alley, and it was not received well. It closed after 49 performances in 1957. And so considering the small scope, this pre-production turmoil, and these low expectations, the final songs featured in the show kind of came together very quickly because they had spent so much time working with this original lyricist. It's like, well, we better hustle through this. In fact, Mitch Leigh later told author Ken Sharp in Writing for the King, quote, "The song didn't take very long at all to write. It was one of those fluke kind of experiences where Joe wrote the lyric and I wrote the song overnight. For all the songs in the play, Joe's lyrics came first, and then I wrote the music. His lyrics were to advance the dialogue. That's how we used to write songs." End quote. And that is very much reflected by the fact that originally the song, later known as The Impossible Dream, was in the script originally just called The Quest. And the iconic opening lines to Dream the Impossible Dream to fight the unbeatable foe were adapted by Darion directly from Dale Wasserman's original TV play script and then expanded upon from there. So, you haven't seen Mount of La Mancha. So, without giving the whole plot for everyone, quick version is, for those who haven't seen it, Don Quixote, in his delusions, has taken to referring to a woman named Aldonza, who is a sex worker, as Dulcinea, the lady to whom he has sworn loyalty. Now, you'll remember Olivia from the book. Dulcinea doesn't show up in the book. She's referred to a lot, but she doesn't actually physically show up in that. So that's another change from the book to this adaptation. But anyway, Aldonza comes to him at a point in the show, and with her being much more weary and cynical by everything that the world has thrown at her, tells him, "You're going to get yourself into danger pretending to be a knight. And I don't understand why you do this." And Don Quixote explains that, well, whether a knight wins or loses any fight does not matter, as long as he is true to his quest. And Aldonza's like, "What's a quest?" Like, what is that? And Don Quixote explains in song.
"What does that mean, quest?"
Why, it is the mission of each true knight. His duty, nay, his privilege, to dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go.
And the original Broadway version of it is performed by an artist by the name of Richard Kiley, and I sent you a link to a version of a performance that was done on the Ed Sullivan Show. There is also out there online a filmed version of the Broadway production with that original cast that's surprisingly not bad quality, but not nearly as good quality as the archival version of the Ed Sullivan Show performance, and it condenses it down nicely. What did you think of Richard Kiley's original performance of The Quest in Man of La Mancha?
Oh, it was wonderful. He has such an operatic voice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I don't have much to say about it, but it was incredible. It's vocally incredible. The way he plays into the emotion, incredible. Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent.
No, I love his performance. There are other later versions. There was a Broadway revival. A lot of people like the actor who played Don Quixote in the Broadway revival a lot. His version is also very good. I actually did get to see a live performance at a theater production in Denver, Colorado when I was in high school. And it was like a very high quality theater production. Like they hired in actors that flew in from elsewhere. It wasn't like a famous name, but it was someone who had like done shows legit. I don't remember the gentleman's name, but he was very good. And so I first saw Man of La Mancha, the film adaptation from 1972, in high school before we went on that trip, because the teacher was like, well, we have these tickets and we're going to take the whole class to go see Man of La Mancha while we're down there. So let's have you watch the movie adaptation. And so that was where I first saw that. I was very much enamored by it. And I recognized The Impossible Dream, The Quest, from Elvis's version by that point, because I had been an Elvis fan for many years by that point. So I was really excited to see where it had come from, what the story was behind it, how it was connected in. And I really enjoyed the story of Man of La Mancha. Like, I really loved it. I fell in love with that musical while I saw it. Oh. And one thing that was done musically in Man of La Mancha that sort of sets it apart from a lot of Broadway shows at the time is that, in spite of it taking place in the 17th century, they took a lot of inspiration from later styles of Spanish music. Like, there's a lot of flamenco in the score.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In the cinnamon tree, little bird, do you sing for me?
And there are some like sort of typical Broadway show tunes in there as well.
Dulcinea, Dulcinea, I see heaven when I see thee, Dulcinea.
The Impossible Dream, The Quest, is a guitar-driven bolero with this very driving, almost march-like rhythm. Mm-hmm. And in the show, and honestly in most subsequent covers and performances, they keep that rhythm, and they increase not really the tempo, but just building an intensity before culminating in this big release on the final verse. But what do you think of the song The Quest, in its sort of stage version of it? Because the lyrics are different a little. It focuses a little more on, to love pure and chaste from afar, like a knight would, and that sort of thing. But the lyrics are mostly the same.
This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to fight for the right, without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause.
Yeah. So what I picked up on listening to the song with a closer ear this time, this week, was that I guess I never really paid close attention to the lyrics. And I, instead of saying, like I had a dream and I worked hard and this is where I am now, it paid off. The song, which I feel like most songs with a dream, is either I accomplished my dream or I failed my dream, Yeah. But instead the narrator, or the singer, the performer they're just starting out on the quest. And they have this lofty dream that they're actively working to achieve. And we'll obviously talk about Elvis's versions later. So I'll save the rest of my thought.
Yeah.
That thought really hit me. That Elvis was singing this, but I know we're just talking about the song in general. So I'll leave it at that. It's an interesting perspective of
He's at the beginning of the quest, and it's almost as though he's always at the beginning of the quest.
Yeah,
because that's the presentation. It's what is a knight supposed to be like? When they first march out of the kingdom and they go off on their great quest, what are they going to do? And the experience that they have on that quest may actually be completely different than this image that they have in their head of what this adventure will turn out to be. But they're so optimistic at the time. And even then, as I was saying earlier, a lot of the ethos is it doesn't really matter whether or not I win or lose.
Right.
No matter how far I go, no matter how hard it pushes me, no matter how hard it knocks me, as long as I'm true to it, then I'm fine with, whatever happens.
Yeah. The measure of success is not winning the goal. It's that someone was brave enough to try.
To do it. Yeah.
It's remarkable. It's really,
Yeah, considering that it was sort of a tossed off, they were thinking about what the character would, at that moment, how he would present it. Kind of. We'll come back to that again as well. So as it turns out, Man of La Mancha ends up becoming a massive success. And The Impossible Dream, its most recognizable hit for sure. There's certainly a few other songs. Little Bird is another one. Dulcinea, to a degree, also had some crossover success, but definitely Impossible Dream is the one that got the most covers, certainly by pop artists. And throughout the 1960s, it is covered by dozens of entertainers. Andy Williams, Connie Francis, Shirley Bassey, Glenn Campbell, Matt Monroe, Diana Ross, with the Supremes and the Temptations. It's pretty good. Cher, Tom Jones does a version of it that's groovy as all get out. Not sure he understands the song, but it's fun. But for the most part, they're all largely modeled after one of the very earliest covers from 1966, which introduced new lyrical changes to sort of try to make it more generalized and not so much about, hey, this is a medieval knight or someone pretending to be a medieval knight. So rather than the line, to love pure and chaste from afar, it's to be better far than you are. And instead of to fight for the right without question or pause, to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause, it's to be willing to give when there's no more to give, to be willing to die so that honor and justice may live. And one of the first versions of it to feature those lyrics, and certainly the one that was the most popular, was by an artist by the name of Jack Jones.
This is my quest to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far, to be willing to give when there's no more to give, to be willing to die so that honor and justice may live. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest.
His version came out. It's interestingly connected to Frank Sinatra. His B-side to The Impossible Dream was a version of Strangers in the Night. And apparently Frank Sinatra, the producer, Jimmy Bowen, got Frank to go in and record it really in a rush because he knew that this Jack Jones version was going to come out. Even though it was the B-side of the single, he really wanted, this is going to be a hit. We need to get Frank to put this out. Sure enough, it became an iconic Frank Sinatra song, Strangers in the Night, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. But Impossible Dream, Jack is the one who ends up having greater success with it. I will say, I don't know for sure if Jack is the first pop artist to do it. I would say I need more evidence. I would argue there's an argument to be made there's another one recorded first. Mm-hmm. It could be Roy Hamilton's. I did find evidence that RCA, because at the time Roy had left Epic Records, he had left MGM after that, and he had signed to RCA Victor, and they were promoting a new single for him as early as mid-April 1966 as The Impossible Dream. That was going to be his single. And we know that Jack's was probably cut around the same time as the time he did Strangers in the Night, which we know was recorded April 8th of 1966. But I don't know the exact date he recorded Impossible Dream. But assuming that the single was recorded around the same time, it's just a matter of was Roy's in the can already when RCA was promoting it in mid-April? How quickly did, it's possible Roy Hamilton actually had the first version of The Impossible Dream from a pop artist. I just don't have the hard information. Most people online, if you go to like secondhand songs or whatever, it gives you like completely wrong dates, both for the Jack Jones and the Roy Hamilton version. Like both of the dates are completely wrong. I was scraping through Billboard and Cashbox and like paid advertisements by RCA and by Cap Records to find out like which was the first, and I couldn't figure out which one was the first. But I will say, like, both of them share the same lyrics, so whichever was first, they got it from the same source, and they're both really good versions of it. Like Jack Jones has a great voice. I got nothing against him, and I know a lot of people like his version. It was a hit, but personally, I'm always going to pick Roy. Of course, and it was released as a single in 1966, and we know that Elvis had the subsequent Roy Hamilton album of the same name in his collection, was aware of it, because the album's final track was a re-recording of You'll Never Walk Alone that almost certainly is the version that inspires Elvis to actually go in the following year, 1967, and record a version in the studio. And there's a lot of shared similarities. If you want to hear more about that, on both Atomic Wax and TCBcast, the Patreon, we have a bonus episode. John and I review Roy Hamilton, The Impossible Dream, the album. But in any case, Roy's version is very excellent. It brings this sort of airy soulfulness to the song, but it's still very much keeping with the spirit of the Broadway version, that it is somewhat operatic.
And the world will be better by far. That one man, scorned and covered with scars, still tried with this last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star.
I think the biggest thing that Roy brings to it is, you know, his inherent influence of spiritual music and gospel music on his vocal stylings. And I think it's a really remarkable version of it. Of the other versions that I'm aware of I listen to so many freaking versions of this song, it's ridiculous. Because I wanted to find out how Elvis's really differed and was it similar to a lot of these other ones. Of most of the other versions, I would also recommend Roberta Flack's 1970 version, which is a much more stripped down, meditative, almost hypnotic interpretation that's just a stunning, timeless performance. But I don't really have much more to add about her version of it.
And to right the unrightable wrong, to love pure and chaste from afar, and to try when your arms are too weary to reach the unreachable star.
So
I have
go ahead.
So with this being, you know, the 1960s and not having YouTube and streaming and all that, like the first person to record this after, like, Richard
the Broadway show, yeah,
would they have gotten that by like seeing this on Broadway, like
possibly, or could have been pitched by the music publishers?
Okay.
Or their producer saw it, or potentially bought the soundtrack album, which had it on there. But certainly one of the big things is if you have the first version out, you're probably going to get a better chance at radio play and chart success. Mm-hmm. And Roy's, unfortunately, was not released until later in April, almost early May of 1966. So regardless of whether or not it was recorded first, it certainly wasn't the first released. And so Jax certainly ended up getting the attention.
Yeah.
So I know that we are all itching to get to Elvis's version, but I got to tell another story. Because one thing that I was thinking about when I was listening to Roy Hamilton's version of it is the context of where Man of La Mancha comes in the 1960s, and that it comes out in 1965, and then you have all these pop versions in 66. And when you hear Roy's version and you think about what else was going on in the world and in America at that time, you can certainly read it through a lens of the civil rights movement. Mm-hmm. And I sent you a version from many, many, many decades later, like one of the best versions of the song. Aretha Franklin did a version at Rosa Parks' funeral in the 2000s, and Aretha just knocks the song out of the park, and makes it explicitly about Rosa. Like, this is her dream and her quest.
That was her quest. To follow that star. No matter how hopeless, and no matter how far.
And so it's clear that people at the time, I think, were looking for songs and art to kind of give them inspiration and guidance during the 1960s. And certainly that's evident by how pop music shifted, how not only with folk music, but certainly stuff like protest songs. And so I wanted to talk briefly about something that's not necessarily directly related to Impossible Dream as a performance, but I think everyone will appreciate this by the time it comes around. So in 1961, President Kennedy's inaugural address, the one where he famously challenged the country with that famous quote,
"Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country." My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
It inspired many optimistic young Americans looking to the decade ahead to take action. And Olivia, are you familiar with the story of James Meredith?
No.
Okay. So James Meredith was a former U.S. airman who, the very next day after President Kennedy's inaugural address, applied to the University of Mississippi. James Meredith was African American. And even though Brown versus Board of Education said legally schools should not be segregated, the systemic racial discrimination would and did guarantee denial of admission to Ole Miss, as it was called. And he in turn followed through with a lawsuit, which upon appeals all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court, he did win, but subsequently faced very heavy resistance from, well, a lot of people, but especially the governor of Mississippi, Ross Barnett, who had gone to the same university and who compared the racial integration to the genocide of Caucasians. Wonderful Governor Barnett of Mississippi. And it was largely with the intervention of Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy that James Meredith was finally allowed to attend Ole Miss, escorted by several hundred officers to protect him during his arrival at the school. A contentious crowd of over 2,500 people showed up to campus to protest him arriving on campus, and it ended up breaking out into a violent riot against the federal authorities. And there were fears that Meredith would be assassinated, so President JFK invoked the Insurrection Act and rolled the army in to occupy the town of Oxford, Mississippi, to make sure that James Meredith could go to college.
Wow.
James H. Meredith is formally enrolled at the University of Mississippi, ending one chapter in the federal government's efforts to desegregate the university. The town of Oxford is an armed camp, following riots that accompanied the registration of the first Negro in the university's 118-year history. Much of this film record was destroyed when our cameraman, Gordon Yoder, was attacked, but he did salvage pictures of Governor Ross Barnett at the scene. The governor fought the court order long and bitterly before modifying his stand, saying Mississippi was overpowered by the federal government.
Eventually, things calmed down enough that he was able to continue his education there. He graduated in 1963, continued to pursue his education, pursued the cause of civil rights. And in June 1966, around the time that all of these covers of The Impossible Dream are coming out, he organized this march that he was going to take initially, essentially by himself. He was going to start out just by himself and then hopefully pick people up along the way. It was called the March Against Fear. And the plan was to walk from Memphis, Tennessee to Jackson, Mississippi, and in the wake of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 to register African Americans to vote along the way and bring continued awareness to discrimination in the South. And there were a lot of television cameras that followed him, a lot of news reporters that followed him. But I want to read a retrospective report from Pop Matters that describes the events of the first day of the march, June 5th, 1966. Quote, as they walked through South Memphis, they crossed neighborhoods where much of the city's black population was concentrated. They passed near Stax Records, where Otis Redding and Rufus Thomas were popularizing the funky, soulful, modern Memphis sound. By late afternoon, about 8 miles south of downtown in rural Whitehaven, they walked past a colonial white mansion set back about 100 yards from Highway 51, bounded by 14 rural acres. It was Graceland, the home of Elvis Presley. As the surroundings got rural, the mood got hostile. Whites drove up and down the highway, snapping photos and yelling insults. Cars whizzed so close to the marchers that the wind whipped their pant legs. Hurry up, N-word. You're going to get killed in Mississippi, jeered one man. Where are you staying tonight? Other hecklers waved Confederate battle flags, and in the early evening, 2 men rode back and forth on horseback wearing 10-gallon hats and waving massive flags, whooping the rebel yell. A little after 6:30 p.m., Meredith's party stopped about a quarter mile north of the state line. About 30 cars filled with whites had gathered to block them. But Tennessee state policemen dispersed the troublemakers before the marchers arrived. And anyway, Meredith had decided that Mississippi could wait until the next morning. Before catching her ride back to Memphis, he shrugged the possibility of danger off. He had seen worse. End quote. So he walked literally right past Graceland. And the next day, June 6th, 1966, just in the Mississippi on Highway 51, he was shot and wounded by a gunman. And his March Against Fear, initially started alone, was continued by civil rights organizations, and before the march reached its final destination in Jackson, Mississippi, many, many days later, even the Reverend Dr. King had participated. Entertainers such as James Brown, Sammy Davis Jr., Marlon Brando, and Burt Lancaster had turned out to support the march. According to Donna Lewis's diaries, the very meticulous diaries of when she would attend Elvis's movie screenings in Memphis and go see him at the gates, Elvis Presley was in Memphis both days. And that night went to the Memphian to watch 2 movies, and she notes in her diaries on June 6th, quote, we were over, and Elvis was dressed all in black. He was either sick or mad, because he didn't say anything all night. End quote.
To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable
What is that? One of the hazards of this prison, the brave men of the Inquisition.
It means
they're coming to fetch someone.
So at the end of the first act of the musical Man of La Mancha, the song is reprised as Don Quixote is being dubbed a knight by the local innkeeper, who he has proclaimed as a local lord, and he swears once again to his lady Dulcinea. While unbeknownst to him, Aldonza is being assaulted and victimized by a group of mule drivers that Don Quixote had briefly defended her from, but ultimately let go. The very act that had earned him his imaginary knighthood had caused his lady very real harm. And shortly thereafter, the Inquisition, the Spanish Inquisition, interrupts the play within the play to take one of the other prisoners away, but he doesn't know it initially, so Cervantes starts to panic. And the other prisoners mock him. Are you afraid? Where's your courage? Is that in your imagination too? No escape, Cervantes. This is happening. Not to your brave man of La Mancha, but to you.
Quick, Cervantes. Call on him. Let him shield you. Let him save you, if he can, from that.
Civil rights figure James Meredith resumes his symbolic march through Mississippi. A march halted last year when the 34-year-old law student was cut down by a sniper shotgun. This year's walk begins at the spot where he was shot. Final goal, Jackson, the state capital. His so-called March Against Fear is also a roadway campaign urging Negroes to vote in the upcoming Mississippi gubernatorial election. Celebrating his birthday during the walk, Meredith hopes to cover the 210 miles in 10 days.
Well, not this time. But you see, Cervantes, there is a difference between reality and illusion. And a difference between these prisoners and your men of lunacy.
So in 1968, the Imperials recorded their version of The Impossible Dream, and there is absolutely no way that Elvis was not familiar with their version of the song. It was on their album New Dimensions, and the reason why we know this is that his first performed version of it features the Imperials doing a fairly faithful interpretation of what they did on their album, albeit Elvis takes it to a completely other level. But did you take a listen to the Imperials version of The Impossible Dream?
I did. Yeah. It's very interesting. I haven't listened to a ton of Imperials stuff.
Most people don't.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know what their typical style is, but I kind of had I guess my only reference to them is as a backing vocal, where they're really usually pretty gelled, although they do sometimes feature, but so we will talk about this with Elvis's version, but
yeah,
there's a section of the song where the bass singer just really takes the part.
Yeah.
So that kind of surprised me, that I imagine them going into it just kind of as a quartet. So it's
yeah.
And the world will be better for thee. That one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strong with his last ounce of heart to reach the unreachable star.
Every once in a while, they would have soloists do verses in
I'm
their
sure
songs.
Cheryl Nielsen did.
Yes. Oh, yeah, all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. And Cheryl Nielsen, in fact, also did a version in 1970. And this is probably the other version that most directly inspires Elvis's interpretation. He did, and it's so weird. Coincidentally, his album that this is from is also called New Dimensions, just like the Imperials album that The Impossible Dream was on. The primary difference, aside from the fact that it's solo, is the lyrics. The Imperials actually do use the original theatrical Broadway lyrics, because them doing a gospel song, it makes a lot more sense to say, march into hell for a heavenly cause.
Yeah.
It certainly makes a lot more sense.
To right the unrightable wrong.
be better far than you are, to try when your arms are too weary, to reach the unreachable star. This is my quest, to follow that star, no matter how hopeless, no matter how far.
As Rabia and I discussed recently on TCBcast After Dark, Cheryl Nielsen would go on to later re-record some of the songs that Elvis really liked him to perform, including this one on an album called Elvis's Favorite Singer. This is in 1982 after Elvis has passed away. And he also, around the same time, records his memories of Elvis and kind of giving thoughts on a lot of the songs that Elvis liked. And
I love that album.
I know, it's
weird.
so cool.
I listen to it a lot.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I love his perspective on why he thinks the song Impossible Dream resonated with Elvis so much. I'll play the audio clip, but I'll just read it here for you, Olivia, as a reminder.
I think he was touched by the song because he grew up in poverty, from a poor family in a poor area with nothing much but dreams. Yet he dared to dream of brighter days and better things. I feel sure that's why Elvis identified so strongly with the impossible dream.
To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go.
Now, The Quest / The Impossible Dream has an unusual place in the canon of Elvis's live performances because it is, I think, the only other song that Elvis in the 1970s used to close his concerts following his return to live performing. What do you think of Elvis closing his shows with something other than Can't Help Falling in Love?
It's wild.
It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah. You listen to it and then you hear the
drum roll at the other.
Yeah, you're like, what?
Ronnie Tutt just going at it.
Yeah. But it really speaks to how strongly the song resonated with him if he was willing to do that, you know?
Yeah.
To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go, or to right the unrightable wrong, to love good and chased from afar.
Yeah. So the first performance that he does this at is January 26, 1971, the opening show. And he does it every night during the engagement of January, February 1971 is the closing song. And there's even on that opening show, he does Can't Help Falling in Love in the middle of the show. Mm-hmm. And he introduces Hal Wallis because Hal Wallis is in the audience. And he doesn't do Can't Help Falling in Love every night like he usually does, and certainly not as the closer. He does the Impossible Dream. And I was thinking about why did he choose to do this now in January of 1971? And I teased you about this before we were recording yesterday or a couple days ago. And I was like, can you guess? Can you guess why? Because when I looked at the broader context of what was going on in his life, it made absolute sense as soon as I figured it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Took me a while.
Why would January 1971 be a good time for him to maybe take on a song that he could maybe do as a victory lap of I have achieved a dream?
Yeah. Well, so we determined that this is falling very shortly after the Young JC's award. What is the technical name for that?
Yeah, the 10 Outstanding Young Men.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he had just won an award that he was extremely proud of. People say he carried this award around afterwards. And I guess it reinvigorated him. But what I wanted to say about that is, so how we were talking before about the meaning of the lyrics, what I think is, I don't know, noteworthy, that the song, like we said, is about kind of starting out on a journey, and it's like starting out on your dreams. And
Right.
I think it is so, I guess, surprising or something, that Elvis feels a connection to that sentiment at this point in his career. So maybe it is I achieved a dream, but maybe it's a little bit of I I got this award, and so now like I want to continue. Like I want, like, I'm not done, I'm not done with these dreams. And that, I don't know, that realization made me feel a little emotional. Just
Yeah.
seeing this falls in his career and all that.
Absolutely. No, I adore these closing performances. The one that I initially sent you was the version from January 28th. And all of them, just, he's throwing himself completely into them. It's so wild because for most of these shows, he does it after Suspicious Minds. And so you can, on at least one of them, you can hear that he's a little out of breath at the beginning of the song. Not all of them. There's a few where he takes a little bit of a break and like kisses somebody just to catch his breath and take a moment before he goes into the closer. But he commits so hard to this in January 71 and February 71. And like the Imperials version, he has Armand Morales of the Imperials do a section alone, just in his bass vocal. And I've seen YouTube uploads of this performance where some people are like, oh, it's nice that you let JD Sumner do that. It's like, first off, JD would do it a lot lower. But it's Armand. Like, he wasn't doing it with the Stamps at this point in 71. It was the Imperials.
That my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest.
And the world will be better for this. That one man is cloaked and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage.
But it's so cool that they have this homage to the Imperials version within this, and it's certainly Elvis, allowing them to sort of have. Most of the audience wouldn't have known that they had also done it, but it's nice that he gets to let them do that. But I was thinking about the way that Elvis structures the song differently, because if you listen to the many dozens of other versions of The Impossible Dream, the one thing you notice is that there's a final verse. And the world will be better for this, that one man scorned and covered with scars still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star. And Elvis repeats it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you if he's the only version.
As far as I can tell, at least to the point that Elvis does it, is the only person to repeat it.
Yeah.
It's just not a thing.
Yeah.
And he also combines the lyrics at different points. At various times, he does do both To Love Pure and Chaste from Afar in 71, but then later, as time goes on, some of the later performances of it, later in 71 and into 1972, he starts doing To Be Better Far Than You Are.
To right the unrightable wrong, to be better far than you are, to try when your arms are too weary to reach the unreachable star.
And he never does the line, to be willing to give when there's no more to give, to be willing to die so that honor and justice may live.
No.
He never does it. So, One thing that's interesting about that, if you go back into Peter Guralnick's Careless Love and you look through what was going on in January of 1971, that opening show, maybe worth remarking upon that Elvis received a death threat. The opening show, reportedly performed wearing a bulletproof vest, and everything was very tense throughout that engagement as well. Afterwards, he changes the closer back to Can't Help Falling in Love during his other engagements in Lake Tahoe, Las Vegas, and he does continue to include it in his set list a handful of times through 1971 and in the November tour that autumn. But after 1971, we only have recorded evidence of 2 more performances in 1972. One comes on February 16th, 1972, which is recorded and multi-tracked by RCA. Felton is trying to capture some unique performances for an album, which was intended to release alongside Elvis on Tour, with the original concept title for Elvis on Tour, Standing Room Only, was going to be on that album. And at various points, according to Ernst Jorgensen's Life and Music, Elvis was considering recording Impossible Dream both in the studio or live and considering it as a single. But he never did. And because the album, Standing Room Only, was canceled, the version that was captured on February 16th, 1972 was not released until after his death on the 1978 compilation He Walks Beside Me. So did you take a listen at all to the February 72 version?
Not that one, no.
Okay. It's fair. It's one that most people I don't think would go out of their way to listen to. It certainly has popped up in a few other places since then. I know it was on the 70s Masters set. But it's essentially just like an alternate master. And by this point, he's implemented some of the changes that you hear at the final version of it, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And so it's very similar, but it does still feel a lot like the 71 version in terms of flow, I guess you could say, even though he has taken back over doing the verse that was previously done by Armand.
And the world will be better for this, that one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage to reach the unreachable star.
But I like it. I what I really like about Elvis's interpretation of The Impossible Dream is it is so much more loose than a lot of these other versions that are out there and were out there before him. The lyrics are delivered in a way that's almost conversational, and it's very expressive in a way that I think really only Roberta Flack's is, and not remotely in the same way.
Right.
It's just a fascinating interpretation, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get to the other 1972 version. But we're going to go back up. Remember I told you to put a pin in how W.H. Auden left Man of La Mancha, and how we ended up with the Impossible Dream that we have, swapping lyricists. So the original novel, if you remember, Olivia, which is intended to satirize all of those old historical, well, not historical, but those much older chivalric medieval novels where these heroes and adventurers were going off and discovering new lands and saving damsels. The original Don Quixote ends with him falling sick and on his deathbed renouncing all the time that he wasted studying and emulating these stories of chivalry. And he reclaims his real name, Alonzo Quijano, and dies a good Christian man of sound mind, not insane. Which just sucks as an ending.
That's horrendous.
It's a terribly unsatisfying ending. It's very downbeat, but it was kind of an interesting way of Cervantes, as I understand, also kind of making sure that other authors didn't use the character of Don Quixote for stuff. Like, see, this is what's right and true for the character. He's eventually going to give this up.
Yeah.
I don't know that I agree with
point
the
of
creative
whole-
choice.
Yeah, like, what's the point of any of that?
Yeah.
Then
Yeah. So when they reached that point in the show where Don Quixote was supposed to sing the quest, the lyrics that W.H. Auden wrote were in line with the original ending and essentially had these very satirical lyrics. And I unfortunately, I tried looking for these. They've only apparently popped up a couple times in museums and stuff. But he refused to alter it because he came in as a fan of the book. And he's like, this is what's true for this character. You know, he would be a little more fatalistic about this. And we should poke fun at all of these medieval tales of chivalry. And Wasserman disagreed because I, Don Quixote, the story that he had written, was not actually about Don Quixote the character, but it's about an exploration of the relationship between author and character. And Wasserman, later recalling the argument between himself and Auden, remembered that Auden insisted Don Quixote is insane.
Mm-hmm.
To which Wasserman responded, but it is a madness that we happen to need.
Mm-hmm.
And Auden responded, that is errant romanticism. And Wasserman then replied, I know, but it happens to be my thesis. So Auden leaves the project. Darien is brought in, and in the final version of Man of La Mancha, when Cervantes announces his intent to have Don Quixote repent from his story, the prisoners revolt. And they threaten, we're going to destroy your stuff anyway, and steal it, and everything that we had threatened at the beginning of the show. So Cervantes panics and improvises a new ending, whereby Don Quixote is lying on his deathbed, and Aldonza comes to him and sings to him, reminding him, because he can't recognize, like, he's decided, I am who I am. I'm Alonso Quijano, and I need to put these silly stories aside. And so she comes to him and she's like, no, remember me? And he can't recognize her because she's just some village prostitute that he's never met in his mind. And she's like, don't you remember I'm Dulcinea? And she sings a little bit of the song that he had made up for her, Dulcinea, Dulcinea. And then she tries to get him to remember his quest, the impossible dream.
Tell me the words.
To dream the impossible dream. But they're your own words. To fight the unbeatable foe. Don't you remember? To bear with unbearable sorrow. You must remember to run where the brave dare not go.
And then he rises from a bed singing an earlier song, I Am the Man of La Mancha. And then just as he's rising from the bed, collapses dead. And as Sancho Panza, the squire, is mourning his friend, Dulcinea assures him that even though the body of Alonso Quijano has died, the hero Don Quixote will live on. And in that proves the character of Cervantes's and Wasserman as the author's notion that fictional stories and myths, even if believed to be driven by an insane unwillingness to see the world at its darkest, can also bring a sense of hope to the downtrodden. As Mitch Leigh told Ken Sharp, quote, the song is centered on the concept of doing good in the world. That's what the song is really about. That's what we're all supposed to do. We're not supposed to accept the world as it is, but as it ought to be. End quote. On April 16th, 1968, in South Dakota, Senator George McGovern introduced Senator Bobby Kennedy in a presidential campaign event, referencing the lyrics of The Impossible Dream. And in a retrospective account later, McGovern said that night, RFK asked him, do you think it's impossible? And McGovern told him, I didn't cite that song to discourage you. I simply thought that it was a very moving passage about fighting for what you believe in. End quote.
With your hearts right
The final time that Elvis performs The Impossible Dream is, of course, perhaps the most famous version of it that he ever did, because it appeared on the Madison Square Garden album. It was performed June 10th, 1972, in New York City.
We'd like to do our version of Impossible Dream. To dream the impossible dream, to fight the unbeatable foe, to bear with unbearable sorrow, to run where the brave dare not go.
And as we see in Epic, during the press conference for that show, of course, Elvis is asked a lot of questions. Among them...
Mr. Presley, on the subject of this service, what is your opinion of war protesters, and would you today refuse to be drafted?
Honey, I just tend to keep my own personal views about that to myself, because I'm just an entertainer, and I'd rather not say.
Do you think other entertainers should keep their views to themselves, too?
No, I can't even say that.
As we see in Epic, Baz Luhrmann clearly has his opinion, which I think is held by many Elvis fans sympathetic to Elvis's plight, which is, it's the Colonel's fault. I think that lets Elvis off the hook too readily. One of the things that, as an Elvis fan, I have long had to reckon with is the tension between Elvis's success, the inspiration that he gives me, and so many others. The stories of his quiet generosity. There's so many stories of him being gracious and generous with his money, with his time, and just being a good man. And yet I understand where people out there, someone who isn't as keen to just let him off the hook, might go, how can Elvis stand on stage in New York City and sing of his fight for the right without question or pause to be willing to march into hell for a heavenly cause, when we know there was a march for worldly causes outside of his front door in 1966, and he, as far as we know, didn't even step outside?
Without question or pause. Honey, I just tend to keep my own personal views about that to myself, because I'm just an entertainer, and I'd rather not say.
What do you think of Elvis's version of The Impossible Dream from Madison Square Garden, Olivia?
So I've never really connected with it. And I think it's, I wish that his vocal was a little more consistently strong at that point in his career.
Yeah.
Because it's a song that warrants that. And there are certainly strong points in the song. But at this point in his career, it seems like in order to have those strong points, he needs to take other notes a little weaker than he would have had to. And that we see he did in 71.
Oh, and that's even evident, when you compare any of that live audio from 71, even with what we have from Elvis on tour.
Yeah. So I've always found it a little disappointing just knowing the potential of the song. I do like Ronnie Tutt's interpretation. And you mentioned this. We talked a little bit about this.
Oh, boy. We're going to talk about that.
But it really separates it from the Broadway aspect, because it is almost like, and when you said March, when I listened to the Broadway version and the versions that are more emulated after that, I don't get March, or I didn't think of the March, but that's the word I have in my notes when talking about Ronnie Tutt, which is a really clever interpretation of the song, because it is discussing like a journey, and it is a march forward.
Yeah.
So I appreciated that part, but yeah, his Madison Square Garden version has always been a little underwhelming to me, and that's why I'm so glad we have the versions from 71, because he knocks it out of the Park. And I was thinking with the singer from the Imperials, what is his name?
Armand Morales. Yeah.
Yes. Taking the verse, and obviously it's the verse he took, originally in the Imperials version, but Elvis kind of steps back, and this man is singing. He sings the verse that one man, scorned and covered with scars, still strove with his last ounce of courage. And I feel like he is taking that verse to reference Elvis, to say like Elvis is the man that did this, which is notable, you know.
When I listened to the 71 version, one of the first thoughts that I had was the fact that it comes after When I'm Laid to My Rest, and then it's almost as though this other voice comes in like a eulogy.
That my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest. And the world would be there for me. That one man covered his scars.
Yeah. Which is reminiscent of Aretha Franklin's version at Rosa Parks's
funeral.
And that is just the choice. I mean, the song is to describe a hero, and who is a hero if not Rosa Parks?
Right.
And so absolutely, and then James Meredith following your story.
And I know if you'll only be true to that glorious quest, and her heart lies peaceful and still, she's been laid to her rest.
Here's the thing, though, about Elvis's interpretation. What I love about it makes it so special and unique from the many hundreds of others out there, not just the dozens before him, but the many, many, many other ones after, is that he's completely uninterested in ceremony. Elvis's Impossible Dream feels so much more personal and more soulful, in spite of this maximalist arrangement that is all horns and Ronnie Tutt just slamming on the drums, rock and roll in the middle of a Broadway show tune. It says so much more about the artist singing it than a myriad of other versions that have plenty of pomp but no personality. Elvis understood what it meant for him to have heroes to aspire to when his world was nothing but a struggle.
I'd like to thank the JCs for electing me as one of the outstanding young men. When I was a child, ladies and gentlemen, I was a dreamer. And I read comic books, and I was the hero of the comic book. I saw movies, and I was the hero in the movie. So every dream that I ever dreamed has come true 100 times.
He never says, I saw movies and comic books, and therefore I wanted to fight specific injustices just like them. He says, in essence, I saw myself as able to represent something bigger than myself. And his speech concedes that he was very much self-aware that he was not one of those gentlemen over there who are, as he says, building the kingdom.
These gentlemen over here, you see these type people who care, who are dedicated. You realize that it's not possible that they might be building the kingdom of heaven. It's not too far-fetched in reality.
I don't think Elvis was under any delusions that he was like those other young Americans changing the world for the better. Men that it had prior to him included Bobby Kennedy and John Kennedy as recipients of that same award. And I think that's why that award meant so much to him, is that by sheer virtue of being an entertainer, they felt merited to give it to him. Mm-hmm. And there are not a lot of entertainers that got it before him. I checked. It's less than a handful of entertainers, including Pat Boone, weirdly. But I see why. Fine, upstanding, good Christian man. One thing that I think about The Impossible Dream is that it's very much a spiritual kindred to My Way. And in fact, not too terribly long before writing My Way, both Paul Anka and Frank Sinatra did versions of The Impossible Dream. To be honest, they're not very good. I mean, they're fine, but they're no My Way. You know, Frank sounds completely disinterested in the song, like he doesn't like it.
To be willing to give when there's no more to give. To be willing to die so that honor and justice may live. And I know if I'll only be true to this glorious quest, that my heart will lie peaceful and calm when I'm laid to my rest.
I saw that Frank had a version and I didn't listen to it specifically because I felt like it would upset me.
And I asked Rabia about it and she gave it another listen and she was like, yeah, it doesn't sound like he cared much for it. She said she didn't think that he ever did it live even. Which was unusual. And My Way is interesting because Elvis also records that in 1971 in the studio, and it doesn't come out. And it's interesting that Elvis had considered recording Impossible Dream in the studio, but didn't, and then considered it as a single, but then didn't. But around the same time as My Way, and that he stops performing The Impossible Dream just before he starts seriously putting My Way into rotation. And you would think that if by the time Aloha from Hawaii comes around, if he still felt like a comic book hero, don't you think he would have included The Impossible Dream in Aloha from Hawaii?
Yeah.
I've loved, I've laughed and cried, I've had my fill, my share of losing. And now, as tears subside, I find it all so amusing.
But he goes for My Way. And again, in 77, continues with My Way. And My Way, you know, it offers more concessions to human shortcomings than The Impossible Dream.
Yeah.
And in Men of La Mancha, when Miguel de Cervantes is confronted with his cowardice by the other prisoners and mocked for being unable to face the reality of what's going on around him and just, you know, being a bad poet and an actor and no one who's really seen the harshness of life. He defends himself and he says,
I've lived for over 40 years and I've seen life as it is. Pain, misery, cruelty beyond belief. I've heard all the voices of God's noblest creature. I've seen my comrades fall in battle or die more slowly under the lash in Africa. I've held them at the last moment. These were men who saw life as it is. Yet they died despairing. No glory, no brave last words, only their eyes filled with confusion, questioning why. I do not think they were asking why they were dying, but why they had ever lived.
Oh, what is a man?
Rumors that you hear about me are trash. I'm an 8th degree black belt in karate. I'm a federal narcotics agent. I am. I swear to God. No, you can do whatever you want to do. I'm just saying what I am. They don't give you that if you're strung out and you're done. No. image is one thing, and a human being is another.
How close does the image come to the man?
It's very hard to live up to an image. I'll put it that way.
Seeing the world as it is, Elvis as he was, we all know that the human fell very short of our expectations. Looking up reviews of the Madison Square Garden concert, a lot of Elvis fans at the time felt it was, some of the more purist Elvis fans thought it was a little bit of a disappointing show because it was a lot of covers and a lot of big ballads and stuff like that. And it wasn't him just doing his rock thing, But I adore the Madison Square Garden version of The Impossible Dream. It was the first version that I heard from Elvis. I had the tape of the Madison Square Garden album, and I played the hell out of that. Mm. And it continues to be an inspiring version of the song to me. And I think with Elvis, who was a very romantic, chivalrous, quixotic movie hero and singer of songs.
Without a song, the day would never end. Without a song, a man ain't got a friend. Without a song, the road would never bend. Without a song. So I'll keep singing the song. Good night. Thank you.
He left behind this body of work that continues to, as it always did, inspire and influence and provide a sense of relief and hope. And the art continues to live. And I think the world was better for this. Mm-hmm. That's my song of the week.
When life itself seems lunatic, who knows where madness lies? Perhaps to be too practical is madness. To surrender dreams, this may be madness. To seek treasure where there is only trash. Too much sanity may be madness. And maddest of all, to see life as it is and not as it should be.
The world will be better for this. Oh, that one man, torn and covered with scars, he still strove with his last ounce of courage and to reach the unreachable star.
So, if you enjoyed our show this week, please shoot us an email, tcbcast@gmail.com. You can also find us on social media. We are on Facebook. Beck's got us on Instagram. If you enjoy what we do and you want to support the show, please consider donating over at patreon.com/TCBcast. We have all sorts of bonus content and goodies. We have more coming down. Now that I'm back, I'm going to be getting more seriously into that. We have some really exciting episodes in the pipeline. We have a really fun one that I'm not sure when we're going to get to coordinate it. It's been on the checklist for a while, but we're going to be re-reviewing a movie that was voted upon by our patrons, one that Gurdeep and I reviewed in our first year of TCBcast. So we're going to do it a lot more thorough. It's going to be you and me, Beck and Ryan.
Woohoo.
We're going back to 1968, and we're going to talk about Live a Little, Love a Little. Oh, it's going to be fun.
I can't wait.
I can't wait. It's your favorite Elvis movie.
Yes. I can't wait.
It's going to be so exciting. Many, many more topics to do. We have many albums left to cover. We have many films left to cover. We're not going anywhere. We just passed 400, and buddy, we're going to be around for a while. So, all right. That's it for the week. So, Olivia, if you have nothing else, it's a hot time in Florida.
A rainy night in Georgia.
You've been listening to the TCBcast, an unofficial Elvis fan podcast.
Someone must have stomped on his head with those blue suede shoes.
Thank you and good night.